Welcome to Birken Forest Monastery's live stream. I am Ajahn Sona. And today we have questions and answers. So please feel free to leave your question in the question bar. It's often referred to as a chat bar, but not in this live stream. It's a right speech and question bar. So with that, let us go on. Pia, ask the first question.
Ajahn, our first question in the question bar is from Fractal Neuron in Orlando, Florida. Dear Ajahn Sona, what is the evidence base for karma? It seems apparent that the outcomes of individuals and groups are poorly correlated with their intentions and levels of virtue, at least in this life.
Well, Fractal, yes, that is correct. It is not particularly well correlated. People who did atrocious things seem to get away with it and get a nice little place on the beach. And people who were very virtuous and heroic and generous are killed on the street by some rascal, etc. So yes, karma is not totally apparent in a single lifetime, quite obviously. And that if you are only referring to a single lifetime, you will not have a coherent sense of justice in the world. Most religions obviously see this and say that there is no apparent justice in the world, or they just dismiss it by saying God works in mysterious ways, or that justice will be served after this life. And so from the Buddhist point of view, first of all, the Buddha is very clear that a complete understanding of karma is unfathomable, it's unthinkable, it's incalculable. So it's too sophisticated and too many variables and probabilities for a human mind to process it absolutely. The Buddha seems to have done it the best possible. It's somewhat like sophisticated physics, quantum physics, and so forth. There's only so much you can understand about the system and process about the system. But it's a commitment. So some people take it on faith that if you do intentional good, that there will be good results. There's a very sophisticated examination of this. It's not just casual in the suttas. So there's a discussion of types of behavior and the results. By the way, karma requires intentional behavior. It's intentional actions. Certain emotions, of course, though, are also karmic. An intentional thought, like a volition imbued with anger and so forth, can have different results depending on whether you manifest it in speech or in action, or whether you just think it or feel it. So it's very sophisticated, it's close to the complexity of physics. And it happens very fast, of course, in life, and some people are skilled and others are not. There are descriptions of why it takes place, why the karmic result. By the way, so the results of karma is called vipaka. Most people misuse the word. It's now entered the English language. It's your karma. Well, in the sense and the way people are using it as it's your karma, it's more like results of a previous action, but actually that resultant is called the vipaka, or the fruit of a previous intentional action. So it's cause and effect in the moral dimension. And the most sophisticated analysis of it is in what's called the abhidharma. You can actually get a reasonably understandable version of this. There's a compendium of abhidharma, which is the layperson is approachable by the layperson. Just plunging into the abhidharma, it's something like 6,000 pages long, and benefits from somebody guiding you through it. But there's a smaller, more sort of for a student version of it, the Abhidhammata Sangaha, or the Compendium of Abhidharma. And you can just buy this online. Bhikkhu Bodhi has a very nice translation. And you can see that they analyze it down to sort of thought moments. A thought moment is broken up into 17 parts. And depending where the volition occurs in that 17 parts determines how long the resultant is away. There's all kinds of karma. There's instant karma. And you remember perhaps a song by John Lennon called Instant Karma? Instant karma is, you go to hit somebody and you break your hand. So that can happen on a regular basis. And then some things are delayed by time, a few days or a few months or a few years. You see this in all kinds of examples in life where justice catches up to somebody, or somebody has rescued somebody, and after 30 years they find them and bequeath their entire possessions to them, etc. And then it vanishes out of sight into different lifetimes. And of course, if you don't have some immense capacity for the memory of previous lives or the intuition about other people's previous lives and their future, then you won't have access to this. But there's a lot of types of knowledge that we don't have access to, but we trust those who apparently do. Certainly, I have to take the word of physicists about quantum physics. I can't personally verify this. Certain astronomical things as well. I don't have the equipment to verify what they say, but I have some trust that they are reporting what they see. People have faculties of intuition as well. Like where if somebody manages to come up with a great piece of music and so forth, it's apparent that they know what they're doing, and not everybody can appreciate all that they know. We have partial appreciation, say, for Bach or Beethoven or something like this, or Miles Davis. And others have more full appreciation of these things. They see a much more detail and coherence in them. So there's lots of types of realities out there that are only glimpsed partially. We certainly see that humans who do not have any sense of cause and effect, or that there'll be any results from certain types of behaviors, are certainly, they're usually washed to the margins of society. They're either they end up being alone or in prison. It's also has a correspondence to madness, mental illness, and so forth. Moral idiocy, in a sense. So this kind of humans intuit this, and whether they believe in cause and effect in the moral dimension or not, and there's lots of modern philosophers who don't. They see no moral, that morality is just a fabrication, a social fabrication. Yet it's very hard for most people to live without some sort of behaving as if they did believe it, So I will leave that with you. I can't just guarantee you a scientific proof for the theory of karma, but we can point at a few of these things. Yeah.
Ajahn, our next question is from Ariel from Rockford, Illinois, United States. How can you comfort someone when physical suffering like illness arises? I can't seem to comfort others when they expect me to respond with pain and worry, making me seem plain and simple, like a jerk. How can you respond to people who are worried about other people's suffering or their own suffering?
Well, sometimes when you first are a kind of an excited convert to this idea of detachment or equanimity regarding suffering, or the understanding of why suffering arises or how to respond to it, you can be a bit out of place in ordinary social situations. When people talk about, oh, so-and-so's ill, I feel so terrible for them, and that, you know, they must be grieving badly, heavily, and so forth. If you start saying, well, there's no need for grief, you know, no need to feel bad, that may not work, you know. So you have to understand who you're talking to and what their attitudes are and how easy it is for them to misunderstand you. So, but quite often the best policy is silence in the face of this. If the person's not ready to hear these kind of things, they don't need to be lectured about detachment or equanimity. This is something that is not easily conveyed. You need a sympathetic and interested audience in order to convey these ideas. The person has to be inquiring and coming towards you in order for the communication to take place about these attitudes. These are high philosophical attitudes. You see them in other schools. You see them in the great Greek philosophers and so forth. This detachment and equanimity regarding the great tragedies of the world, and how to have some sort of detached and lofty view of the whole slaughterhouse, which is existence. So, but not lots of people are just simply can't process this. So you have to decide whether it's appropriate to speak or not, or how to say it. And that's a skill that needs to be developed over time, for sure. Okay, let's go on to the next question.
Our next question is from the live questions. The Buddha, from Terry in New York City. The Buddha speaks of, quote, disenchantment with feeling. You talk about emotions of those well developed in the path still changing, but being only in the positive. Is there still enchantment with these emotions? How does this connect to what the Buddha said? Thank you.
Well, enchantment is a vague term. Enchantment generally, of course, is an English word as well. So when we use the word enchantment, we mean that somebody is out of touch with reality. They're enchanted. So it's a kind of you're in a trance of some sort. And people get enchanted with red sports cars. They get enchanted with romantic trysts, and they get enchanted with money and fame and all kinds of things. And it doesn't lead to their well-being and happiness. It often ends up in suffering. So that's what is meant by enchantment. So to be disenchanted can have two meanings. I mean, in contemporary, it started sometime in probably the 18th century or 19th century. More or less sociologists or great writers started to talk about this feeling of disenchantment with the world because of scientific attitudes. Everything had been reduced to atoms and space. So there's nothing but atoms and space, and that's not very magical. So children are enchanted. They're out playing in the grass. They're staring at the sun. They pretend to fly. It's an enchanting world. And then you go to school and they drain the magic out of the world by telling you how it works. And that there is no magic, etc. So that's a different type of disenchantment. It's emotional barrenness, etc., which is a problem. Actually, it's too much left hemisphere, as they say, and the right hemisphere can have a warm and humanistic relationship with the world around. It doesn't have to be an empty play of atoms. So, but the disenchantment we're talking about in Buddhism is the capacity to stand outside of this, like not be pulled into illusions. But the emotions that accompany this are actually exquisite. So the emotions of the enlightened mind are primarily range from joy to deep serenity and stillness. And these are gorgeous emotions. And by the way, they're not trying to have them necessarily. It's that when we disabuse ourselves of the psychic irritants of greed and hatred, agitation, sloth, and skeptical doubt, the mind glows, and the emotions, the beautiful emotions appear and just are sustained without necessarily needing an external cause for them. So you don't need a sunset or a rainbow. The mind is not harassed by these psychic irritants, these hindrances. Then it returns to its basic state, which is positively motivated. It's very full of positive emotions. So that's how it works. We have to just clear up the confusion around language about this, words like enchantment, disenchantment, etc. So we shouldn't just presume that when we use these words in the Buddhist context of meditation and the development of the enlightened mind, that we're importing them from ordinary usage, and they don't really correspond to the way they're used in ordinary language. Okie doke. Next one.
Next question is from Tori in Tampere, Finland. Hi, Ajahn. Could you please give your definitions of the words ego and soul? I'm a little confused because in many other Theravada Buddhist Dharma talks, the terms soul and ego are described as synonyms and used interchangeably. I understand that ego is a self-made concept and dies with the body, but if there is no soul, where does karma then accumulate, and what part of the being is reborn?
Yeah. Well, this word ego is primarily a Freudian, it's coined by Freud. Ego, id, superego, things like that. And then it's around in the common language. And it gets borrowed from psychiatry and psychology. Of course, they use it in all kinds of different ways as well. And it doesn't really mean the self. It means a constructed sense of self. And quite often, to be egotistic is to want recognition and fame and admiration and that you're the best and all this kind of stuff. So, and the soul is not a word that it's not intrinsic to Buddhism. The soul is something referred to usually in Christianity. So the most of European and American civilization is totally saturated in Christian ideas, including this idea of soul. And the soul is, most Christians can't define what it is. What they use the soul all the time, the immortal soul and so forth. But there was a period in Christian history with Christian philosophers, Thomas Aquinas and so forth, that actually had to deal with what exactly they mean by a soul. And they came up with, the definition is that it's a indestructible monad, an eternal kind of thing which is not subject to change. and that's why it's immortal. This is kind of a definition that was floating around at the time of the Buddha as well for the Atman, the Atta, the Atman. And the Buddha investigated this and said there isn't anything that corresponds to that. First, the idea of an unchanging center that is your true self doesn't hold up. You can't understand that logically, because if it doesn't change, it can't be conscious, it can't feel, it can't decide, because those are all activities. So it would be some sort of lifeless steel ball bearing that is floating through space, without consciousness. What kind of self is that? And where is that? So they could not come up with a better definition. It's just like naive physics is what it is. Poor logic, etc. And so the idea of a self, in order for it to be immortal and to survive life and survive death, they could only figure, well, it has to be indestructible, it has to be, etc. But the Buddha is a very sharp logician as well. He said, they can't, that couldn't be conscious. Because consciousness is a process. In fact, everything is a process. So he says, everything is a process. And then people say, I see, so you're one of those nihilists, right? You think that since there isn't any immortal self, that when you die, that's it. And the Buddha says, no, actually, I'm not an annihilationist. And then, so you're an eternalist. You believe there is a self, that it goes through time unchanged. No, I'm not one of those either. So this is where it gets dicey and challenges people's capacity for reason and logic. And this is where he also comes up with this process philosophy, which is called dependent origination. He says when such and such a cause is there, such and such can follow. When A is available, then B can arise from that. Without A being there, B cannot arise from that. When A ceases, B also ceases. And so he's talking about fluid causality, flux, flow. And this is not so easy for the human mind to grasp. Continuous flow. In our language, we talk with nouns. So we talk about an apple as a thing. And what you get taught in school, if you get taught the parts of speech, an apple is a noun. But an apple isn't a noun, it's a verb. It's appling. Which moment in time is it the real apple? None of the moments in time. An apple is a flowing process. A tree is a flowing process. A human is a flowing process. Everything is a flowing process. And by the way, even the word everything, when we refer to everything, what's the thing? Where's the thing? There's no thing. There's no thingness. It's thinging. Everythinging. So this is hard to grasp. It's not very practical to talk in these terms. You can't use verbs for everything. So when I ask you to pass the salt, it gets the job done. And the Buddha also said, wise people don't insist on, precise language. They use whatever the language communicates. So he even talks about himself, and I went there, and you went there, and so forth. And then people would say, but I thought you said there was no self. I said, well, it's just a convention of speech. It doesn't mean there's actually a self. It's a convention of speech. But to really inquire into this is changes your view of both the sense of the ego and the soul and all of that. And so egoing is okay and souling is okay, but a soul is not okay. An ego is not okay because that doesn't correspond to reality. So that's in brief. And these kind of questions are they're not that hard to figure out, but you just have to get used to what the Buddha is talking about here. Yeah. Okay.
Our next question is from the question bar, from Emperor Palpatine in Vancouver, Canada. You said you mostly focus on the suttas because those are closest to what the Buddha probably actually taught. There was an early school called Sautrantika, who rejected all abhidharmas and held suttas as supreme. How close was this school's teachings to what the Buddha actually taught?
Yes, there's a number of schools. There was the famous 18 schools. By the time, within a few centuries of the Buddha, there had become up to 18 different schools, nikayas, and they had somewhat variations of the teachings. Most of them were differed in terms of the abhidharma. Usually they had very similar sutta collections and Vinaya collections. The Vinaya is the rules of conduct for monks and nuns. That is very consistent across the schools, and the suttas, at least in the early schools, are quite consistent. However, one of the problems is that most of them are missing. There's very little. What these schools actually taught and everything is not available. There's a few points, and where we find out about the other schools is primarily in the Theravada Abhidharma. So the sautrantika Nikaya is known to us really from the Abhidharma of the Theravada. And there you have this collection of points of controversy. And there are 500 points of controversy that are between the schools. And they're kind of briefly talked about. So we have some knowledge of these schools. Most of these schools did not write down anything. This is kind of a favorite topic of mine in recent times about when were the suttas written down, when was the Vinaya written down, when was the Abhidharma written down. The Theravada, so why is the Theravada such an important school? I mean, this is it is the largest school left. It is found in Sri Lanka, Myanmar, Thailand, Laos, Cambodia, and has spread also out to the west as well. And then there's the other primary one is the Mahayana, which has had a rough ride in the 20th century. It was the dominant school in China and so forth, but the Chinese Communist Revolution came in and wiped out most of the monasteries and monks and nuns. You can see places like Korea was was called the Hermit Kingdom. It was a Buddhist dominion, but North Korea is obviously not Buddhist. They wiped everything out. So the Mahayana in general has a rough ride in the last few centuries. So the Theravada is in the healthiest condition at the moment. And the other schools are almost vanished without significance anymore. And we don't have full collections of their teachings, etc. The Theravada, the Pali Canon was said to have been written down in about the 1st century BC in Sri Lanka. at something called the Fourth Council. And that is that's about 3 centuries after the time of the Buddha. And so it was fortunately written down in a very comprehensive way. And so that is why, in a sense, it's considered a very early and reliable version. So the idea that this school did not have an abhidharma is okay with me. The abhidharma, I don't think, was set down at the time of the Buddha. It bears clear evidence that it is of a later time. It is developmental over time. It's kind of like a commentary, basically. It's held in high esteem in Buddhist countries, and is quite often thought to be the word of the Buddha, the direct word of the Buddha. I don't think it's the direct word of the Buddha, but it's those monks who developed it felt that it qualified as the authentic meaning, what the Buddha meant. And by the way, the Buddha did allow that other monks and nuns who explained things in different but authentic ways could be accepted as the authentic Dhamma. So sometimes a person would come to them and say, "This nun said this, explained it this way," and he said, "Just so, that is Dhamma. That is, I approve of that. It corresponds with what I would have said." So that's the kind of the rationality of the abhidharma, is that it corresponds with what the Buddha would have said in a more analytical way, and it's primarily for analytical type minds. It's outside the scope of sort of ordinary people. It's more for analytical types. So some of the schools would have rejected it and said it was plainly the work of monks, and that we are staying with the actual words of the historical Buddha, and that's it. So that's a little brief tour through the history of these schools. Yeah.
Our next question is from the live bar, from Upasika David in Tucson, Arizona, United States. What is meant by delusion? Can you speak a little bit about what is meant by this? Is it an aggravated daydream?
Lots of people walking around in delusions. Delusions is a misapprehension about reality. You have an idea that you believe corresponds to reality, but is false. It's a false idea. It's like, I think, that see, these are English words. We're borrowing English words. And there's two words, illusion and delusion. So an illusion is something that it appears as real, like magic. People do a card trick and it's an illusion, right? And then there's delusion, where the person believes they are the Emperor of Canada or the President of the United States or something, but they're not. There's something like that. That's a delusion. Napoleon. So people have delusions about themselves and about other people, and these are based on all kinds of distortions about the facts of reality. There's two words in Pali that are being translated as delusion. One of them is avijja, which means simply exactly the same as the word ignorant. Ignorant means lack of gnosis or lack of knowledge. So vijja is knowledge, avijja is the lack of knowledge. So that would be the correspondent delusion. And the other one is moha. Lobha, dosa, moha, which greed, hatred, delusion, but moha is like a kind of a dull darkness that a person, referring to a person's intellect or mind. They're dull, misinformed, distorted, darkened kind of, and that is slightly different than deluded. It's just closer to stupid than deluded. Just ignorant, distorted, dull. So these are the actual Pali words that are translated as this word delusion. And what is, how do the Buddha define it is, one who is deluded, or has avijja, sees permanence in what is not permanent, sees satisfaction in what is unsatisfactory, sees substance in what is insubstantial. So that is anicca, dukkha, anatta, the three characteristics of reality. Things are impermanent, they're not permanent, they're not satisfactory, they are without essence or without substance. So that is the delusion that he's concerned about. And so you have to practice a lot to undo that in your mind. So, people think that if they just get the right job, or if they now they got some money, they're going to be happy forever. And then if I just got some money, I'd be happy forever. If I went to that restaurant, I'd be happy. Be happy, happy, happy. And then it turns out it slips through their fingers. So it's a mistake about the nature of reality, and you forget. So that's what mindfulness is the ability to hold that reality in your mind. So everybody is prone to this. It's you just get this idea about what'll make you happy, and it's based on based on a situation that is not reliable. You've got to you're finally got climbed to the top of your profession, and you've got an office on the 90th floor of the World Trade Center, and you just think, what a wonderful thing, I've finally made it, It's September 10th, 2001, finally made it. I'm in, good, really nice, and everything. This is the best building in New York. It's a great place to be, and so completely deluded, right? Next day you find out it's all gone. Yeah. So that is a brief explanation about delusion. Yeah.
Next question is from Dmitry from St. Petersburg, Russia. I was wondering why Buddha Gautama has chosen for himself and subjected other monks to the particular lifestyle of collecting food from lay people and nothing else like agriculture, commerce, etc. I'm sure that Sammāsambuddha does nothing for no reason, so there must be a special reason for this. Could you please clarify this for me?
Yeah, it's quite a common idea, is like, why are these monks begging food from people? Why don't they just grow a garden, etc.? Well, the Buddha did this very intentionally. Notice that some Christian monasteries do exactly that. They sustain themselves. They have their own work. They market certain things. They might farm. They make things and sell it. And you can be completely cut off from society by doing that. The Buddha did not want the monks to be cut off. He didn't want them to be independent. Now, the people who become monks are not, just failures in society, and so they decide to become a monk because somebody will feed them. They come from all kinds of walks of life. They have all kinds of qualifications, and they're bright and capable people. And what the Buddha is asking them is to give up your independence. You are no longer allowed to be independent physically, and you must remain dependent on the society around you for your basics: food, clothing, shelter, and medicine. And it might, for the ordinary person, they want to be proud. They proudly want to be independent. They don't want to be reliant. It takes away your sense of self, and that's exactly what it's about. You're now dependent on the offerings of ordinary people, and it's an act of ego reduction. And the second thing is that if monks were allowed to do these things, they would probably, some of us like solitude and don't really want to be involved with people, so we would raise our own little garden and make our own little thing and never have to see anybody. They become hermits. The Buddha wanted to make you dependent so that there's a continuous interaction. So in the Buddhist countries, the monks will often go every single day on alms round through the villages so that people will see them every morning, and they have a chance. And there's no demand to feed the monks, but anybody who wants to. It's like an act of generosity early in the morning. So that's another reason the Buddha makes them, he says, the monks are a matchless field of merit. So this is, you have to have the concept of merit, that generosity and promoting generosity in society, sharing and giving, is a meritorious thing, and that people who do give will get magnificent results from that. Not just a moment's gratification of generosity, although that's beautiful as well, but that there is a karmic result. So that this is the essence of Buddhism, is that there is karma, and that positive results come from positive actions, and positive actions is to share and to feed, offer food, clothing, and shelter and medicine to each other, and that it's not just an empty gift, it has great fruition as well. So that as the monks go out, they're actually providing people with a way up, a more abundance of their own life, not the monk's life, but the giver's life. The positive energy of generosity it provides abundance in the future. This is not known in standard economics. If you go to the London School of Economics, they won't teach you this. But this is the spiritual world, and generosity has magnificent abundance. And supporting the Sangha is one of the most meritorious of gifts, and vast results come from that. Other people question that, I shouldn't give with a sense that I'm getting something back. That would be to mar my generosity. But the Buddha is saying, no, you've got to understand cause and effect. Yes, you should enjoy giving, and you don't have to worry about whether it'll come back. It will. It just does. And so it doesn't reduce the purity of your generous nature by the fact that you know absolutely that there will be positive results from having given. So that's the basis of it. And it's very, very deliberate. Very, very deliberate. Yeah. Okay, let's go on.
Mm-hmm. Our next question is from the live chat from Tissa and Molly in Chilliwack, British Columbia, Canada. Complexities and conflicts the world is facing currently, quote, peace by peaceful means, valued in Buddhist practice, seems like an unachievable goal. If we can collectively create a war so quickly, why does it take so long to work together to achieve peace? What can we do collectively or individually as Buddhists to promote peaceful coexistence?
Well, I think we don't want to be too naive about this. I don't think the Buddha held out that it was a peace movement, that we would, just by being peaceful, we would bring peace to the world. It's only the individual that achieves peace, so you are a peaceful person, but you can't control other people. If they're ignorant, full of violence, if something will trigger them and turn them into a war machine, then although you're peaceful, it won't change their minds. We can be an example to those who can register these things that are moved and motivated by this. And of course, many people are. So the Buddha was an inspiration at the cost of one's own life. So this is a radical commitment. The idea of abstaining from killing and so forth, even at the cost of one's own life, is very inspiring for some. Others will just ignore that. For them, it's a power game. By the way, though, and others would say, well, it's just suicide in this world. If you don't protect yourself, you're going to get killed. But it doesn't work that way. People who are heavily armed get killed often. They're armed to the teeth, and as often the reason why they get killed is because they're armed to the teeth and they're prepared to kill, but they end up dead. And others who are not armed, etc., sometimes escape harm altogether, but not necessarily. Innocents are killed. Very, very determined warrior types are killed. You don't solve the situation by just being a pacifist or a hawk, a warmonger. Neither of them can give you safe journey through this world. But it's about your conscience and your attitude. So if you're of the type that thinks, well, under certain circumstances, I kill. I do this and I do that. You're always living with that sense. I have to preserve my life. I have to defend my life. I have to defend everybody's life. So you're in a kind of relentless situation because the danger can occur anytime. But if you have given up on this, like you no longer are so attached to even your own life, your own existence, surviving and everything, a huge burden is dropped. You feel relaxed, You say, well, maybe I'll be killed, maybe not. Maybe I'll live to be 100 and die in my sleep, but I'm not willing to be on high alert and willing to kill all the time, because it's just, you will never experience peace in your life. The only way to get that feeling of peace is to give up the preservation of life at all costs. You can't preserve your life at all costs. So you have to kind of relinquish and this is a very deep human desire to stay alive, You only by relinquishing that can you finally find peace, So the Buddha is looking outside of this life, beyond the value of this life. And he's plainly saying that, others will kill, I shall not. Others will advocate killing, I shall not. Others will condone killing, I shall not. This is the decision you make. You don't think, well, I'll try to change everybody's mind about this. I shall try to be an example of things. I shall speak in advocacy of peace, but I don't torture myself by the thought that I will convince them. They may or may not be convinced. Some may be convinced, some may be inspired, some may not, but you do it anyway. Success or failure, you do not care, you just do it. You just live a peaceful life and have advocacy of peace. And but not expecting success at this. Yeah.
The next live question is from the One. In the Parayanavagga, the Lord says to Mogaraja that it is not to be seen by the Lord of Death, we must be forever mindful, see the world as empty, and abandon all views of a self. Can you explain what it means to see the world as empty and how it differs from having no self-view?
Empty, meaning that you see a lack of substantiality in all things. So anicca means impermanence. Anatta means without substance. And they're kind of synonyms in some way. Because things are impermanent, therefore they are intrinsically insubstantial. They're empty of substance. Anatta, particularly though, lack of self, is to do with applying that to to your very self. And this is what happens. People come across Buddhist philosophy of that everything's empty of substance. But they fail to really apply that to, like, who am I? Where? There's a sense of that the person who went to sleep last night is the one that woke up this morning, or who was around 10 years ago is me. But when that's really put under scrutiny, when you look in and say, if everything is changing about me, what is it that changes? And that's where the what is it, that's the assumption of the self. There is no what is it that changes. There's just change. And so you, at that moment, vanish. The concept of yourself, the assumption, the unquestioned notion is you suddenly realize you essentially don't exist. That the you doesn't exist. Of course, there's processes which have always been going on, but there's nobody in the midst of this process. There's nobody behind the processes. There's thinking and feeling, but nobody thinking and feeling. All this kind of stuff. So that is what is being got at in a very brief form, a somewhat cryptic form there. So that it needs explanation and unraveling and etc. and contemplation. Notice the emphasis on when mindfulness is present all the time. Death is no longer there. One escapes into the deathless. Yeah. Okay, so let's try another question.
The next live question is from Goofy Duder. Ajahn Sona, I've been struggling with the difference between your breath meditation videos. In one, you go in depth about filling the whole head, but the other focuses entirely on the in and out at the nose.
Yeah, this is two stages of it. So the first stage is the noticing of the air as it enters and leaves the nasal cavity. And so this is the first instruction. The Buddha talks about breathing in a short breath. I know I'm breathing in a short breath. Breathing out a short breath, one knows. Breathing in a long breath, one knows. Breathing out a long breath, one knows. And then experiencing the whole duration of the breath. I breathe in, experiencing the whole duration of the breath. So it's just a kind of way of gradually bringing you into this very demanding attention exercise. Breath meditation is a huge demand on your attention. So this is obviously the world's capacity to pay attention is falling apart these days. According to all the psychologists and the sociologists, like especially because of the incessant, 10-second clips that these kids are being raised with now. I mean, this is maybe not such a big deal for people who didn't have a whole lifetime staring at very rapidly changing screens and so forth. It may not affect somebody who's 60 years old and didn't grow up with this, but if you're a very young child and you're constantly exposed to this strong stimulus mediums that are just endlessly trying to catch your attention, you may suffer a huge attention deficit. But even if you're a concert violinist or a neurosurgeon or something like this, to do breath meditation is this tremendously demanding exercise on attention. You're trying to attend to this neutral experience of breathing. So the first part is focusing on the breath. Your mind will run away. You'll be kidnapped and taken off to various events in your past and in your future and someplace else and so forth. And you'll have to bring your mind back to the breath and again. But perhaps when you succeed and you stay with the breath, you will have the experience of this cool, airy air filling your head. And this is kind of the goal, is that when your mind finally stays here and you have this experience of the airy quality of the breath, you internalize this, and this is called a nimitta, or the mind-made facsimile of the breath. It's no longer the breath. It's kind of your mind has turned your body into this light and airy thing. It fills your head. So this is the sign of accomplishment. The sign of accomplishment is that you are fully present, experiencing joy and ease, and your body is full. Your head is full of air. You're an airhead. This is not considered a compliment usually in society, but it is a highly desirable state. You have lucidity, clarity, and you're finally present, and you're being. So this is why there is no real contradiction. It's just stages of development. Okay, is there time for one more question, perhaps? Yeah.
Yes, Ajahn, our final live question is from Sakata. What do you do with merit?
Merit is the results of positive actions, and they can arrive in great abundance, and you are to enjoy them. You enjoy your meritorious results. And part of, it's interesting, the Buddha, of course, downplays a lot of the sensory experiences of life. Like, in order to really be enlightened, you need to go beyond the sensual life of sights and sounds and smells and tastes and touches and ideas and so forth. But at the same time, he says that a person who it is the result of positive merit that a person has the capacity to enjoy the experience of sights, sounds, smells, tastes, touches, and ideas. These are what he calls the 5 chords of sense pleasure. If you can't enjoy sights or sounds or smells or tastes or touches, you live a deprived life. So this is the kind of what is thought of as a good human kind of experience, is that when you invite people over for dinner and you enjoy the conversation, you enjoy the food, the smells, the tastes, the touches, the sights, all of these things, that is a result of merit. The fact that you even have eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, and mind is a result of merit. Notice that some people don't have eyes that work. So they're blind, they're deaf, they can't smell, they can't taste, they have no sense of touch, etc. So to have these things fully intact that's a meritorious resultant, to have the senses. And some have very acute, clear sense of sight, acute, clear sense of smell, taste, touch, and so forth. The Buddha himself was described as having a absolutely amazing quality of vision, of hearing, of smelling, of tasting, sensitivity in all of these senses. They're very, very high. He wasn't swept away the sensory things. He's looking, is there something even better than that? But it's something that's positive at least, and to be missing these things is negative. So this is what merit can come from, all kinds of things. If you do some acts of generosity or loving kindness, the meritorious result may be profound, samadhi, which is a kind of the unification of the mind and the heart, a feeling of deep satisfaction and oneness, which is accompanied by profound joy. So there's merit coming to you, and what are you to do with that? To nurture it and maintain it, actually, and then create more. So these are what is to do with the results, the merit that accrues to you through your positive actions of thought, of speech, and of action. And with that, we will end our Q&A today. And we will be back next week if things go well.